In the initial HBR piece that launched this thinking a few years back, we, as you probably know, here we are at a business school. It's almost contractually obliged that in every Harvard Business Review article there be a 2x2 matrix. So our matrix tried to plot the organizations of our world according to whether they had old and new power values, so those mindsets we described earlier, and models. And by models we mean, does their model work like Minecraft or like Tetris, right? Is it enabled by mass participation, or is it enabled by traditional resource consolidation, exclusivity, etc.? So let's have a look now at some of these. We'll take a tour on the compass. We'll start in the bottom left, the castles. So the castles are the familiar organizations, of course, that have run on old power, both in terms of mindset and in terms of model. I think what's interesting is, obviously, you've got a whole bunch of dinosaurs here, but you also have a company like Apple. So we make the argument that Apple is actually a castle. Why? Because you don't have to, just using technology does not make you new power. There are many people today, leaders, organizations, using technology in profoundly old power ways just to broadcast at people. In the case of Apple, the model is the genius in Cupertino, the product designer, decides what we need before we know that we need it, and then the product descends upon us and we all buy it. And culturally, in terms of its mindset, Apple is very secretive and they're notoriously not a good collaborator as a company. So the lesson here is that, of course, you can still have a successful model even in this castle quadrant. And I think a key lesson of this compass is, we're not all trying to get to the top of the right-hand side here. Each organization and its model requires a slightly different strategy. If we move to the right, we've got these cheerleaders. Cheerleaders are organizations that still have traditional old power business models. Think about a CPG company, think about a Patagonia, but who are evolving in their mindset towards some of these new power values. They're embracing transparency or new forms of collaboration, or in some way embracing the crowd in their models.
Yeah, we've seen some really interesting examples. Think about the Guardian newspaper, which is 150 years old, perhaps more. They're really thinking now about how they create more participation as a part of their journalism. So the stories that you read on the Guardian, you'll have a chance halfway through to sign a petition to find out more about an issue. They've now got a database of police killings across the US, which has been put together by the readers of the Guardian itself. And the Guardian have now actually put together a membership base, that they're now getting more money from people who think of themselves as members and supporters of their cause than they do advertisers. So there's some really interesting model shifts beginning in this cheerleaders quadrant, which gets us to the crowds. And these are those organizations and movements that have both new power values and new power models. So let's think about Occupy as a perfect example, arguably too perfect an example. One of the critiques of Occupy was it became so decentralized it was very hard to make any decisions, right? They actually ended up in a situation where they couldn't focus their efforts as precisely as some wanted to get there. And we see things in this quadrant like the amazing and inspiring work of Black Lives Matter, who have worked hard to sustain what they call a leader-full movement. Not a leader-less movement, a leader-full movement, where actually leadership isn't in one person, but is actually distributed throughout of their network, and that's how they think about scale. And then we end up in the quadrant which is right now in front of Congress, which is the quadrant we think of as the co-opters. Those organizations who have worked out how to use new power in terrific ways, but are then tending to a set of old power values.
So think of Facebook, right? Facebook is a brilliant new power model, right? It harvests our participation. In the book, we call Facebook and platforms like it participation farms. And what we mean by that is that we're all delighted on the farm, participating, sharing, connecting, and yet all of our energies are being harvested by Facebook as a platform. All of the economic value created is owned by Facebook. The governance and decisions about something that's become crucial to democracy, governed by Facebook. In fact, governed really by one or two people within that company. And the algorithm that shapes our feelings, our thoughts, our habits, really we have no visibility into. We don't get to dial in and out who we hear from, what opinions we're exposed to. So this is perhaps the most interesting quadrant in town right now, because it's these people who know how to harness this energy of the connected crowd, but are ultimately doing that in a way that is very extractive. And you see the same kind of dynamic with ISIS, where you see Aqsa Mahmoud. ISIS designs a model that allows a teenage girl in Scotland to perfectly design, right, a message for other teenage girls, rather than for, you know, young men or people in different demographics, and yet it all ladders up to the restoration of a medieval theocracy. And, you know, perhaps we'll come to this a bit later, but we think Donald Trump as an individual leader is another example of this co-opter model.